Hi everyone, welcome to video 5 of how to read music. Today we're going to be looking at drum and percussion notation, dynamics and other score markings. So it's kind of like all the other bits that haven't quite fit into the other videos. This is the last video of the how to read music series, so well done for making it this far. There will be a summary video on its way. I'm just kind of putting it together at the moment. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, so let's start off by looking at percussion staves. So you do get percussion instruments like xylophones, which can play a scale and have notes. So those would be placed on a treble or bass clef, like any other tuned instrument. But with percussion instruments, we also get untuned instruments, and that means that they can only make one note. They can only play one note, that's why they're untuned. So this is what a stave would look like for an untuned percussion instrument. You can see we have two lines going down, and that is the clef sign, and then we also have the time signature afterwards. If we just have a closer look, so yeah, again, the first thing to notice is that the clef is different. So instead of having a treble or bass clef, which is for a series of notes that can be played in a scale, we have this new clef which looks like a pause sign, so like two lines going straight down through the stave line. And because percussion instruments do not play more than one note, that means that we don't need a key signature, because an untuned percussion instrument isn't going to be able to play a B or an E flat, it just plays one note. We still need a time signature for untuned instruments. For a lot of the time, percussion instruments is all about keeping time and rhythm, so yeah, it's still important to have a time signature written in. And as you can see, depending on the number of percussion instruments, different number of lines can be used for the stave. So for the percussion one line, we only have one line. So this can mean that the instrument, there might just be one instrument played on that line. So for these lines, all we write is rhythms. So if it's one line, it just means you play the rhythm. So it could be an instrument like a cowbell written on that line. And then here we have three lines, which could be used for three separate instruments. So we could, I don't know, like a cowbell, a tambourine, a triangle. So it kind of just saves space on the score to put that all together. And then as you can see for percussion 3, it's 5 lines. So there would be a key at the start of the piece which tells you which line is representative for which instrument. So here's an example of a 5-line stave for untuned percussion instruments. We have the key at the start, which tells you that it's untuned, and you can see that each line represents a different instrument. So this diagram is for a drum kit. So you can see that the note heads which are coloured in, they kind of look like crotchets. Those are for drums, and then the cross heads are used for cymbals. And then another thing to think about is, for tuned instruments, you might see 3 slashes through a note stem, and this would mean that you'd roll the note or perhaps tremolo it. So it's just slightly different for percussion instruments. If you see 3 lines through a stem and you're playing, for example, a snare drum, you'd probably roll the note. So it's kind of similar to a tremolo, but it's just a roll. If you see 1 slash through the stem on a snare drum, again, we'll just keep using that as the example, you would double bounce the notes. So you would divide it by 2. And then if you have 2 slashes through the stem, you divide the notes by 4. So here's an example of a score that uses 3 different percussion instruments. So as you can see, we still have the clef, we still have the time signature, and we also have a tempo marking, and we have accents. So we'll go on to more note articulation later, but it's still important that even though we can only play one note on these instruments, it's still important to give it character and to say what beats we want to emphasize and all of that kind of things. So here we can see that at the start we've got labels for each line. So the first line is for the tambourine, the second line is for a guiro, and the third line is for claves. Okay, so if we move on to dynamics. So dynamics give character to the music. They tell you how loud or quiet to play the piece. They give you a sense of direction. So here's, if you see, you can see the diagram, which I've just taken off Google, which is a nice clear table telling you the names, so like fortissimo, the symbol, which would be double F, and then we have the definition, which means very loud. As you can see, we've got different degrees of loudness and different degrees of quietness, and we also have gradually changing dynamics, so crescendos or diminuendos, or some people call it decrescendo. Dynamics are placed underneath the stave, and I'd say most of them are pretty straightforward. The only one that's slightly complicated is sforzando, and that basically means that when you play the note, you hit it with a lot of force and then you get quiet very, very quickly. But you kind of learn how to do that the more you play, to be honest, yeah. So note articulation and repeats. So I'm just going to go through some different signs you might see on the score. So the first sign is a fermata, and you usually see this at the end of a section. It signals a section change, and you usually just hold the note for a little bit longer than indicated, and that creates the dramatic pause, which again is the indication for a section change. And you usually see this on chords. If you've got like a chorale piece or religious piece with a lot of organs, or piano or whatever instrument, you normally see a chord and then the fermata sign, which means just hold it for a little bit longer. Here we have an accent, which is what we saw before. So that is just means you accent the note so you have a strong attack or emphasis put upon it. Here we have a marcato. This means that you play the note louder and more forcefully. So you have a lot of accents and marcatos in Psycho when you've got the screeching violins. So yeah, it just gives more emphasis to that note and more force to it. And then we have tenuto, which means you hold the note for slightly longer. Then we have staccato. So staccato means that you play the note as if it's short and detached. So to contrast this, if you had a legato piece, which means that it's very flowy and the notes kind of all seem slightly joined together, staccato would be the opposite of that. So you play every note very short and detached. And here we have a trill. So a trill is where you rapidly move between two notes. So as you can see on this score, which is in treble clef, we have a B note. And then we've got, in little brackets, we've got a C sharp. So this means that the two notes you're trilling between is the B and the C sharp. And then you can see we've got a end of a bar sign with two dots. So this is a repeat sign. So if you see this, this means that you repeat that bar or repeat that section. So you'd usually see two dots on either side and you just repeat that section again. And then you can see the bottom diagram is a double bar line, which means it's the end of the piece. Okay, let's have a look at tempo markings. So tempo markings are placed above the stave, and I've just basically taken two images off Google to show the different tempo markings and what they mean, just because it's easier rather than me trying to list them out. So if you have a quick look through these, the diagram on the left tells you I think there might be Italian names for the tempos and then what that means. So as you can see, like accelerando means gradually get quicker, adagio means slow, and you kind of just remember those the more you play. And then the diagram on the right gives a BPM of how fast you kind of want to aim for. So for an allegro, you're kind of aiming for 120 to 168 BPM. So that's a big difference. So there is leeway within, it's not like a strict, this BPM is for this tempo. It's kind of up to interpretation as well. And the only thing missing from those two diagrams was a tempo. So if you're playing a piece and then it changes tempo, so if you go from adagio, then you go into allegro, and then you see a tempo, that means you go back to adagio, you go back to the original tempo. As always, there will always be more to learn, and I know these videos I've said are in-depth, but they still only cover the basics. But it's enough for you to start reading music, and the rest of the kind of other things you'll learn that perhaps are more complicated or not more complicated. The other things you'll learn, you will just pick up over time. But yeah, I feel like this is still quite an in-depth beginner's video, so you will have a good grounding for when you do go on to learn more. And what we're going to do now is just quickly look at a score, analyze it, and summarize everything we've learnt. So here is a score, again, a picture I've just taken off Google. And let's just have a look. So we've got different clef signs. So we have the treble clef, we've got the bass clef, and we also have an alto clef. We can see that we have key signatures, and I'm not going to go into massive depths about this, but you can see that the clarinet, which is the first blue square, has only one B flat, whereas the other instruments all have 3 flats in the key signature. And this is because that clarinet is in B, which means it's a transposing instrument. So that basically means that what it plays is different to what it sounds. So if a clarinet in B was to play a C, it would actually sound a B flat. Kind of like that. And you have some other instruments, like some trumpets might do that as well. But again, transposing instruments is like a whole nother thing we could talk about, so I'm not going to go into depth about that now. We have time signature, which is 2/4. And then at the top we have a tempo marking, which is allegro con brio. So allegro means fast, con means with, and brio kind of means with enthusiasm, liveliness. So that's kind of the general feel of the piece you're trying to create. We have different dynamics. So we have double F dynamics, which then changes to piano. So we go from kind of very loud to quiet. We have fermatas, which, as we said before, creates that section change because you hold the note for a little bit longer and it creates that kind of pause effect. We have some accidentals, which, if you remember, was at video 3. We talked about harmony, and an accidental is a note placed outside the key signature. We have ties in several places. So if we just zoom into violin 1 and look at how we would go about playing this line if we were to play it. So first we'd look at the key signature, which is E flat major. Then we would look at the time signature, which is in 2/4, which means that every bar adds up to 2 crotchet beats. Our starting dynamic is fortissimo, so we're playing very loud. And in the second bar we have a fermata, so that just means we hold the note for a little bit longer. We have some ties over the bar line, and then later on in this line we go to a quieter dynamic, which is piano. So now let's have a look at how we would count the rhythms. So we would count the rhythms in quavers, so 1 and 2 and that's just because the first and the third bar are in quavers, so it's just easier to keep that consistency. And these are the notes, so the first bar is all G's, then we have E flat, then we move to F's, and then we play to D's. So yeah, if you were to play this, I'm just going to clap the rhythms. So it'd be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and then obviously we've got the tie and the fermata. And then for the dynamics of this bit, it would be very loud. So thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me for these 5 videos. It's been a journey. As always, subscribe, like, share, ask any questions in the comments below. Follow MK Sounds on Instagram and watch out for the summary video, which condenses these 5 videos into one. I'm kind of aiming for like 10 minutes, so it won't be as in-depth as these, but again, it will just be like the key things that you need to know. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone again for watching these, and hopefully somebody found it useful. So I'll see you all in the next video.